Thank you for that wonderful introduction. If you're viewing this video, it might mean that I eventually have encountered technical difficulties, and this is basically a pre-recorded talk of our lecture for today. So we go over biodiversity. Biodiversity generally has three components, namely ecosystem, species, and genetic diversity. Meaning to say, biodiversity is a very complex and very complicated subject matter. But let's try to simplify things for you guys. Now let's try to define biodiversity first. Biodiversity is biological variance of the variability of life on Earth. As we know, life is basically complex as it is. And eventually, we live in a country that is biologically diverse. The Philippines is biologically diverse, and we have all forms of flora and fauna. Plants and animals in the Philippines is diverse as could be. Now let's try to look at it. Biodiversity is a measure of variation of genetic species, ecological systems in all levels. Like I said, in all levels, from small to big, from big to small. Let's try to break that down from you. Now, like what we were saying, the Philippines is a tropical country. So we have a tropical ecosystem. And whether we'd like to admit it or not, humans are the most supreme of all animals. In short, tayo yung pinakahayop sa lahat ng hayop at may kahayupan. It means that eventually we are on top of the food chain. We are on the hip, so to speak. Now let's try to look at it this way. The Philippines, only 10% of our natural rainforest is still virgin rainforest. We already destroyed 90% or more of it, and eventually that reduces biodiversity. Our biodiversity is getting thinner and thinner, so it is our job, both young and old, to basically keep the diversity and of course to keep as much of it as we possibly could. If you look at it, we have watersheds that basically allows us to have water in our faucets. And to be honest, year by year, the La Mesa watersheds levels getting lower and lower. We need to do our share in terms of keeping that biodiversity alive. Now let's try to go over certain components. For example, if you look at it, we do have fresh water. Fresh water is very much a commodity. So if you look at our topic for today, biodiversity, we basically look at it as a complete ecosystem, air, water, and land. And of course, you and I drink water. Unfortunately, water is a vast resource that is scarce during the dry months in our country. So let's try to put things in perspective. We look at species. Species are living organisms composed of similar individuals capable of exchanging their genes through interbreeding. So if you look at it, we have a lot of variables in terms of species. We are very lucky that the Philippines has a lot of flora and fauna that eventually allows us to have variations of different species, both small and big, like what I was saying. To put things in perspective, if you look at animal husbandry, we do have certain animals that is catered for food production. Let's look at an example, a simple chicken. And if you look at chicken, it is basically very good because it yields 1 kilogram every 30 to 45 days if you look at poultry production. So if you look at it, these individuals, these 45-day chicken is genetically bred for slaughtering. So this type of birds had been genetically engineered, bred for poultry production. Similarly, that's like the layer. Layers are for eggs. So these type of organisms had been inbred. They were bred. They were selected to get the best possible outcome for food production. For example, I've always said is for chicken, for poultry, 1:2. 2 kilos of food or fed to these animals yields 1 kilogram of chicken. Pork, 6:1. 6 kilograms of feeds given to pork or to the pig eventually is good enough for them to be slaughtered. After 6 months, you yield 1 kilogram of pork. And of course, cattle is 1:20. 20 kilograms after 2 years yields 1 kilo. It also means that eventually we need to feed, because you cannot get something out of nothing. You need to basically feed cattle. You need to feed animals. So looking at the diversity, we have so many plants and animals, but few are domesticated. Few are domesticated for food, particularly for our protein source. Now let's try to look at it this way. When you talk about diversity, we also look at plant diversity. There are certain crops in the Philippines that we're really familiar of, and of course they're used for food. Let's say rice, wheat, and corn are 3 major crops geared towards food production. If you look at it, the Philippines is an agricultural country, yet we do not have food security. We need to import rice from our neighboring countries, namely Vietnam and China, simply because we are not food sufficient. We get wheat abroad. So every time you eat bread, it's imported. The only thing Filipino about San Miguel beer is water, because wheat, hops, and barley, the 3 main ingredients of San Miguel beer, is not imported. It's not locally produced. They are all imported. They are sourced, foreignly sourced. So if you look at it, the Philippines' pride and joy, San Miguel beer, 100%, almost 100% of the ingredients are all imported. They are foreign source. So let's try to look at it this way. Why am I saying this? Among all the food, among all the plants and animals, we only utilize few species for our food. Like I said, we only use 3 animals for our protein source, namely chicken, hogs or pigs, and of course cattle in the Philippines. That's widely available. And of course, when you look at grains, rice is a staple. Filipinos, we eat rice in the morning, rice in the afternoon, rice in the evening. We are relatively rice-vivores. And of course, who the hell would not start their day without a pandesal? So we basically love these 3 grains that I've mentioned. Now let's try to look at it this way. We have to basically look at it in a nutshell. We need to have sustainability. We need to have biodiversity. And it's our job to create and to find ways to improve quality and breed, particularly our domestic animal husbandry. That's the reason why research is ongoing to get the fastest yielding variety of rice that is drought resistant, and of course needs less care because it yields more. There would be genetically modified organism that would produce BT corn. Let's try to look at this way. In the world, we have important areas, particularly Europe, Central Asia, Middle East, and North America. The continents that I've mentioned basically are very, very important in terms of agriculture, diversity, and of course sustainability as we know it. If you look at it this way, wheat doesn't grow in the Philippines. It grows in temperate regions. So it goes to show that if we eat wheat, or if we eat flour rather, which is a refined form of wheat, it basically means that it is grown or outsourced in a temperate country. So if you look at it this way, Europe is very vital, even the US. The US and China are industrialized, yet they are agriculture in nature. The countries that I've mentioned are agricultural countries. Meanwhile, the Philippines, we never really have food security. So what I'm trying to drive at is that we need to basically promote food security as we know it. Now let's try to look at it this way. We'll try to go at genetic characteristics, the makeup of species. When we talk about genetic makeup, human beings follow a genetic pattern, a genetic blueprint, so to speak. Sabi nila, may dalawang mata, dalawang tenga, ilong na maganda. So if you walk in the streets, you're surely bound to see a Homo sapien, a human being just like you and me. So we have a genetic blueprint that is similar, and if you see another human being, you could see that they have similar characteristics. Let's try to look at the giraffe. Before, there were long-necked giraffes and short-necked giraffes. When there was a big drought once upon a time, there was an inability of food, and that's the reason why the short-necked giraffe became extinct, because it no longer could cope up with its current environment. Food were scarce, so the bigger or the longer necked giraffes could get food because of their necks. They could get from high above the tree, so to speak. So basically, if you look at evolution, you are not yet extinct, because you are a product of evolution. When we talk about extinction, you could no longer cope up with your current environment. You are a product of a long-standing evolution. Human beings are supreme and the highest form of animal because we have bigger brains. We're not like the dinosaurs. Dinosaurs, they have pea-sized brains. They might be big. Unfortunately, their brains are relatively small. So we may not be as big and strong as other animals, but we build planes to cover transcontinental flight. We build cars to make us run faster than the fastest animal on land. We made ships to make us better than fish. We could travel vast distances because we have higher degree of intelligence. We have the ability to create and destroy our environment, and that made us the highest form of animal. According to Odom, he once quoted that the highest form of animals are humans because we could destroy and create our environment, and we have the ability to heal our surroundings. Let's try to look at it this way. We need to basically allow ourselves to become vessels of change ecologically. Now let's try to go over, like what I was saying a while ago, is that when we talk about animals, there are GMOs, genetically modified organism that is genetically bred for food purposes. Like what I mentioned is that if you eat food, it is farmed. Most likely you are eating chicken, you're eating pork, you're eating beef. And those are all farm-raised chicken. They're not like what they used to be. They're wild forms. They're all domesticated in nature because they are bred for a specific purpose, like I was mentioning a while ago. When we talk about genes, if you look at African Americans, they dominate the NBA. Simply because these people came from Africa. They were slaves, so they are genetically what we call this predisposition to become strong. They dominate the National Basketball Association because they are superior in terms of strength. So if you look at characteristics of individuals, we have family that are smart, family that are strong, family that are big, family that are tall. So that gives us that diversity in that respect. So let's try to go over. So when you talk about breeding is very, very vast and beautiful, because at the end of the day, you could get the best possible traits that you would like. For example, if you are into fighting cocks, sabong, these are gladiator chickens that are genetically modified. Their DNA spells blood because they are fighting cocks. They go over the ring. So if you look at it, their father and mother are all fighters. They come from a bloodline of fighters. If you look at racetrack horses, just the same. They come from champion bloodlines. They're bred to perfection. Because at the end of the day, selective breeding is very, very important. If you come from good stock, then eventually that means that you are very, very much ado to what you are supposed to do. That's why you pay a premium for fighting cocks. You pay a premium for champion thoroughbreds. You pay a premium for, of course, the best possible dog breeds around. That's why you buy the pedigree. Sa Tagalog, may papel. If you go to Cartimar, you have to basically find the pedigree or the papel so that eventually you could see the bloodline of the dog that you're buying. So let's try to look at it this way. So if you look at organization, you are complex at the same time very diverse. You get what I'm trying to say here? Like I said, human beings may dalawang tenga, dalawang mata, ilong na maganda. So eventually we have our makeup. Now when we talk about mutation, that is falling away from evolution. When you go to the mall, when you see an individual that has a horn and has a tail, oh my God, that's not human, because that does not follow the human blueprint. That is a mutant. That basically is not a product of evolution. So if you look at human beings, we know what a human looks like. It looks like you and me. But definitely there are variation. We have different races. We look different, but all in all, we look the same. Okay? Let's try to put things in perspective. So let's try to go over. So when you talk about ecology, let's try to make a rundown. We have an ecosystem that supports biodiversity. We have species that basically promote diversification. And of course, that genetic pool that allows us to create subvariants, so to speak. So let's try to go over a nutshell. Ang lahat ng bagay ay magkaugnay. Magkaugnay ang lahat. Plants and animals are basically interrelated. If you kill one or the other, both biotic and non-biotic components, plants and animals and the like, we would have an imbalance. And we have to basically have that balance within us. Lahat ng bagay ay magkaugnay. Pag wala ka nang makitang isda sa ilog, wala ka nang makitang ibon sa langit, wala ka nang makitang hayop sa lupa, mangamba ka dahil susunod ka na. If you could no longer see any fish in the river, any birds in the sky, any mammal in land, we ought to be worried dahil we're next. Because lower forms of animals before higher forms. Like what I've said, fish, 2 valve heart. Birds, 3 valve hearts. Human beings and mammals, 4 valve hearts. They have different higher complex of organization. So lower forms muna yung would be affected. But at the end of the day, we are all interrelated. So we have to take care of our planet because it's the only one we have. We have to take care of Mother Nature because at the end of the day, you and I are only passers-by. We have to take care of our environment as we know it. Because like I said, ang tao ang pinakahayop sa lahat ng hayop at may kahayupan. We are in charge of this earth. And basically, as such, we have to take care of it. Hook, line, and sinker. You know, I like your topic because the topic is uncovering the hidden value of biodiversity. Because the future is in the hands of our youth. We are diverse as could be. I know some of you are young and are afraid that the world would end because there's a lot of naysayers in TikTok that says, would the world end in 3 to 4 years? My take on that is no. the earth is very relentless. Mother Earth is very, very strong, just like your mother. She would always find a way to heal herself. But we should help Mother Earth. We should do our share. Reduce, reuse, recycle. When I was young, that was the 3 R's of ecology. But as I gotten old, they became 4 R's ecology. They added 1 R. They added repair. Now it's 4 R's of ecology. Reduce, reuse, recycle, and repair. Do our little things. Think locally, think globally, act locally. We have issues all over the world, but we can't do anything about international issues, but we can do our little share. Doing little share cumulatively would spell a whole difference. If every one of us turned off our faucets, that's gallons of liters, millions of cubic of meters of water that would help the environment relentlessly. If we do our share to use reusable water containers, that would reduce plastics. If we turn off our air condition, turn off our lights, and bike to school or walk for that matter, that little thing you do would eventually immensely help Mother Earth. So let's try to go over this way. If you look at uncovering biodiversity, it is very good because we have a frontier of medicine ahead of us. The tropical rainforest may be our next pharmacy that would find a cure for cancer, would help us find a miracle cure. Because at the end of the day, we are in an age of discovery. A lot of us, whether we'd like to admit it or not, would like to be visionaries in the future. And as young people, I challenge you to look at it this way. Biodiversity is yet unlocked. We are yet to unlock a lot of endless treasures in terms of medicine, food production, food security, agricultural economy. How do we say this? The world is your oyster, young people. But eventually, we need to understand what biodiversity is. And to be honest, we're part of it. As a biotic component, you and I, we breathe, we walk, we talk. Oh my God. You know, I was asked by your organizers one question just a while ago, is that what would be our advice to young people? Advice would be eventually to take care of the planet because it's the only planet we have. Let's not be paranoid. The world would take care of itself. Time has a way of dealing with problems. But let's do our share. Like what I was saying a while ago. Little things add up. Helping and doing your share basically adds up to a bigger and brighter future. So I'd like to go over and thank you guys. Unfortunately, if you hear this recording, it means that I wasn't able to find an area in which there's very good signal because we live in a third world country. The Philippines, we have very horrible internet speeds. Although this is a webinar, so to speak, I do wish that I could be with you in person or be with you online. This is just a backup. But if ever you hear this talk of mine, it means that I wasn't able to basically oblige or wasn't able to find an area where 4G or at least 5G signal is available. But then again, I'd like to extend my thanks to your advisor, Ma'am Lauren, of course to your president, vice president, and for everyone who was nice enough to basically extend the invitation to me. And I do hope to be very instrumental, to be a small part in your very, very noble endeavor. With that, I'd like to thank each and every one of you who are tuning in, who are giving their time, and heartfelt commitment towards the environment. I'm sorry if you hear this recording that I may not be able to be answering your questions, and I really am deeply saddened, because at the end of the day, this is what happens when you are remotely located in a certain area. This is just a contingency. Again, I'd like to extend my deepest and humblest thanks to the organizer, of course to your school, and for those of you who gave their ears, lend me your ears for a few minutes. I do hope that you continue on with your study and eventually become an inspiration not only to your family, not only to the community, but to everyone around you. Because I know you're a blessing to your family, to your community, and of course, God. Let's be of service. And with that, I'd like to say good day to all. And of course, nice day to the organizers, and of course to your advisor. With that, I say goodbye. Bye-bye.